Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity Church of Overland Park. If you would be so kind, if you're in the mood, we're going to pop up these words up here. Feel free to sing along if you know the tune. Or if you catch on, you know how to do it. I got up this morning singing, God is so good. I got up this morning singing, God is so good. I got up this morning singing, God is so good. My God is so good to me. Feeling good down in my soul, God is so good. I'm feeling good down in my soul, God is so good. Feeling good down in my soul, God is so good. My God is so good to me. In my time of trouble, I know God is so good. In my time of trouble, I'm singing, God is so good. In my time of trouble, I know God is so good. My God is so good to me. In my time of triumph, I'm singing, God is so good. In my time of triumph, I'm singing, God is so good. You know, in my time of triumph, I'm singing, God is so good. My God is so good to me. When the day is over, I'm singing, God is so good. When the day is over, I'm singing, God is so good. When the day is over, I'm singing, God is so good. My God is so good to me. Every day and every way, God is so good. Every day and every way, God is so good. When I take the time to praise the Spirit, God is so good. My God is so good to me. Oh, every day and every way, God is so good. Every day and every way, God is so good. When I take the time to praise the Spirit, God is so good. My God is so good to me. One more time, everyone. I got up this morning singing, God is so good. I got up this morning singing, God is so good. You know, I got up this morning singing, God is so good. My God is so, my God is so, my God is so good to me.
Yes.
Well, good morning, and welcome to Unity Church of Overland Park, and welcome to what is this week a very nice, warm
Yes.
sanctuary. So
Very
we're grateful
nice.
for that. Grateful for that, and the fact that that happened last week and not this week. So anyway, let's just take this energy of this morning and this excitement, and let's move into a time of prayer.
Yes.
And so this weekend, we honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That legacy of peace, of love, of standing up for truth, of standing up in the face of persecution and injustice. And in this moment, we honor that legacy by remembering the truth that the peace and love that we seek is already within us. That love glows from within us. That peace radiates from within us. And so in this moment, we affirm and realize that truth, knowing that there is no way to peace, that peace is the way. That there is no way to love, that love is the way. And so we commit to being the peace and love that our world seeks. And for that, we are grateful. Amen.
And now let's all stand and join in singing, Love is My Decision.
Love
invite you to now prepare as Fred and Pancho lead us into a time of meditation.
I know you are the light of God, you are the joy, you are the love, you are me. I know you are the light of God, you are the joy, you are the love, you are me.
You are me, and I am you, for we are one. We laugh, we cry, we comfort one another, we support, encourage, and walk together. For when one is struggling, we are all there, for we are one. And this beautiful day, we are looking at, feeling into, and embodying the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who taught us about being strong-minded and tender-hearted. To be strong-hearted in having decisive judgment, in being clear and walking by intention. And at the same time, to be compassionate, with tender-hearted. And so, this day, we know that Jesus taught us so often in the Gospels about the synthesis of opposites. And so we too see this exemplified in Dr. King, that beautiful man whose legacy and love lives on, and whose work is ours to continue to do. And so this day, I invite you now to go into the silence as we listen into what is that synchronistic energy within us. What is ours? Where are those places for us to be strong-minded and tender-hearted? Let's listen in and be open to the voice of Spirit that may have some surprising things to say to us. Let us listen now in the silence. when we are decisive and clear-minded. We move forward with intention. And at the same time, as we balance this and find the middle ground between decisiveness and a tender heart, we see with the eyes of faith, the eyes of spirit, and able to comfort those, walk beside those who may need our support. Sometimes we may feel that we are being led in one direction. And when we really open up to the guidance of Spirit, we see something even more amazing unfolding before us. And it is ours to listen in and to live from that balance. And as we do that, our lives, the life of our spiritual community, the life of our world is changed. For we are walking in intention, with heart and compassion, with eyes of seeing the bigger vision, and knowing that in all of this, the very gifts that we are expressing is coming out of an inward expression of that which is already there, that it is nothing for us to look on the outside for it's the truth, the very truth of who we are, and more importantly, of who we always have been. Walk in strength and walk in grace, dear ones, this day. And so it is, and so we let it be. Amen.
But it was so interesting hearing that song and hearing Pancho singing about that idea, the voice of truth. Because that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. But it goes beyond the idea of just listening to that voice that's within you, that voice of truth that's screaming within you to pay attention to me. You know, almost like the little 2-year-old that's saying, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. You see, it goes beyond that. We have to take that voice of truth that we hear, and we have to temper it with a tender heart, with a loving heart, with the divine love that's within us. It was a concept that Dr. King spoke about in his sermon, A Tough Mind and a Tender Heart. And he began that sermon with a quote from a French philosopher. And I looked up, I tried to see who the philosopher was. And interestingly enough, as these things often happen, this quote has now been attributed to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But in his sermon notes, it says, there was a French philosopher who once said, but the quote is, "No man is strong unless he bears within his character antithesis strongly marked." So in other words, the strength that we have, that divine strength within us, comes from opposites. It comes from being in control of the opposites that are within us. And not just being in control of them, but using them to shine the light of God that we are in the world. It comes from the understanding that it's possible for us to be both peace-seeking and aggressive in the world around us. It was interesting when I first had that thought. I thought it was possible for us to be both passive and aggressive. And I realized that many of us know that all too well. But it's also possible to be determined and set in our ways, and at the same time be a free spirit. In fact, this world demands that. This world that oftentimes can seem harsh and cruel, and can seem to be telling us the very opposite of the truth that we know so well, that light, that love of God, that the joy, the inclusiveness, the abundance, prosperity, the spirit-led nature of God was already within us. And so that was why Dr. King taught his congregation, his followers in the civil rights movement, that they had to combine these two ideas. They had to have a tough mind and at the same time have a tender heart. Because it's through developing both of these qualities that we're able to really fully express that Christ nature that we are, that perfect presence of God within us. And so let's take a look at just how it is that we can do that, how we can live our life with both a tough mind and a tender heart for the world around us. And you know, as I was thinking about the idea of having a tough mind, and I was looking at what Dr. King said about it, he identified a toughened mind as a mind that was sharp and decisive, as a mind that knew what it stood for, that made its commitments and stuck to them, as a mind that wasn't swayed by what went on around it, but was able to take those things and turn within and look within and realize what the truth was for themselves. And as I researched what Dr. King believed about this, read his sermons, and then took the time to watch the State of the Union and the responses to the State of the Union, and then to watch the debates this week, I thought, you know, what he's asking us to develop with a toughened mind, we still need to develop that today. Our mind still needs to be strengthened. We still need to gain this ability to look at the world around us and say, wait a minute, I need to look for myself at what's going on here and not just trust. Dr. King called it a softened mind. He said it was the softened mind that just was accepting of the status quo, that was telling his friends and his family in the civil rights movement, just, this is the way it is, just stay with it. And he said it was his belief that softened mind came out of just the human nature to be trusting and to want to see the good in everybody. I would add to it that it comes from our ability to not realize the fullness of God within us. But I would also say that our minds need to be toughened any more today than they did when Dr. King was leading his march on Washington. And I know I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of seeing the way the world tells me to behave or do and responding. I'll stand in a store and go, 4 out of 5 dentists say this one's better. This one looks identical, but I'm going to trust the dentists instead of thinking for myself. You know, my favorite example of this was the other day I was in a store, and I was in the produce section, and they had 2 different brands of celery sitting there. One brand of celery was marked as they normally are, and the other one was labeled gluten-free. Well, of course it's gluten-free. It's celery. All celery is gluten-free, but guess what? People were standing in front of it and kind of, I'm going to go with this one. And guess which one they were charging you more for? But if we have that ability to toughen up our mind and to think critically and listen to that wisdom, then we might be inspired to pull out our phone and Google, is celery gluten-free? And save ourselves a nickel here or there. But it goes beyond just the way that we're marketed to and advertised and convinced. You see, that line between interpretation and fact, it becomes blurred if our mind isn't toughened. And so we see things reported on print or on broadcast news, and we want to just accept them without thinking, well, maybe I should look for myself. And just so you know, the same thing applies to what you hear me say up here on the platform. As we toughen our minds, we learn not to just accept things because we're told that, to not just sit there and go, oh, well, he went to ministerial school for several years, he's got to know. But to look, to ask ourselves, to think critically. You know, our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, he defined wisdom as the voice of God speaking from within us. And so our ability to develop that tough mind, it comes and it's directly related to our willingness to make the commitment to listen to the voice of God that's speaking within you. To listen to what it is that we're being guided to do, to take care of, to help, to solve, just even for our own spiritual growth. And we can toughen our minds through making that commitment. But remember, life is about balance. We live in a world of what appears to be opposites, and so we don't want to focus just on having a tough mind. But we need to develop that tender heart as well. Because there is nothing that is more tragic than a mind that has become so toughened to the reality around it that it becomes cynical. And it becomes unwilling to see the importance of relationship, the love between friends and family. It almost gets to the point where the mind gets so tough that it sees the world operating just as this giant wheel and all the people in it as cogs. So we have to be careful to balance that idea of listening to the wisdom of God with knowing that the divine love of God is within each and every one of us. Charles Fillmore believed that divine love was a quality that harmonized humanity. He believed, just as Dr. King did, that love had the power to heal in the places where other methods had failed. And so if we can connect with that divine love within us, it gives us that opportunity to check that sort of tough-minded wisdom. So the two of them begin working together. And the same applies for divine love. You see, divine love, without being tempered and checked by the wisdom that you have within you, has a tendency to run amok. Romeo and Juliet come to mind. They're acting out of love. and they end up dead. And we fall into trap after trap after trap as we do these things in the name of love. So unless we have that divine wisdom within us that's helping to guide us, we run the same risk. So what we're called to develop is this idea of a tough mind and a tender heart. It's an idea that Jesus spoke about. When he was talking to his disciples in the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 10, he's getting ready to send them out into the world to share his teachings. And he knows that it's probably likely that they're going to run into some resistance. You know, the ancient world wasn't much different than our world. When people started trying to change things, they didn't like it either. And so he told them, you know, be aware, I'm sending you out as sheep amongst wolves. And so you must have a mind like a serpent and a heart as peaceful as the dove. We have to develop that mind that's able to see what's going on in the world around us so that we can avoid those opportunities that pop up to have ourselves taken advantage of or manipulated or told that we're any less the light and love of God that we are. And yet we balance that with the heart of peace, the heart of a dove. That heart that says, put away the sword and greet me with love instead. And so how do we develop these qualities? You know, it's interesting. I had several conversations this week, and this idea kept coming up that there's a difference between intellectually understanding the truth of something and realizing it. I had several people that said, you know, I always got the idea that I had the light of God within me, but I didn't realize it until this week. And so we might understand on one level that yes, we have the wisdom of God within us, and yes, we have the love of God within us. But in order to fully take those two things and synthesize them together into the Christ that we are, we have to take time in meditation. We have to take time in prayer to realize that truth. So we're going to take time to do that this morning, to go into a time of meditation, a time where we can focus on understanding and fully realizing that divine love, that divine wisdom that is within us. And so just take this opportunity to become comfortable where you are. In this moment, to know and to realize the truth that we are the light of God, that we are the love of God. When Moses stood in front of the burning bush and asked, What do I call you? What is your name? God replies, I am that I am. And so we know that I am becomes one of the most powerful affirmations we can make, because we are literally speaking the name of God, the I, affirming that that power is within us. So we connect with that power. We allow this room to support us as we feel at ease and drift away into the consciousness of God. The consciousness that affirms in this moment that I am the wisdom of God, that I am the justice of God. As Mr. Fillmore suggested, we hear that voice of God speaking to us. And so we listen to the wisdom that is us in the silence. And knowing that we can return to that moment at any time, simply by affirming, I am the wisdom of God. We turn our attention now to divine love, to the knowledge that I am the love of God. And so we allow that love to radiate through us. Speaking to us, harmonizing and healing within us as the love of God flows. And just as with the wisdom, we know that we can return to this at any moment, simply by affirming, I am the love of God. And so we allow ourselves to begin to drift back to this conscious reality. We allow ourselves to begin to become aware of the space around us, and become aware of the lightness that we feel, knowing in this moment that we are the wisdom and the love that we seek. And for that, we are grateful. Amen. You know, there are times in our life where we need to be the wisdom, the divine justice of God, those moments where we see inequality, injustice, persecution just spreading out across the country. And we know that we need to be that justice to cut those threads from the fabric of our society. There are times where we see hatred rising up. And we know that the only way to soften that heart of hatred is through shining the divine love that we already are. And so this weekend we honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But we honor that legacy by making the commitment to grow our toughened mind, to grow our tender heart, to grow in the wisdom that we seek to express into this world, and to grow in the understanding that the wisdom, the love of God, we already have those things within us. There's nothing we need to go outside of ourselves to seek. Instead, what we need to do is realize it. And so we know that we are the wisdom and love of God. We realize that we are the wisdom and the love of God. And now we express the wisdom and love that we are in our world. God bless you.